All right, Sam. So when we last talked, we were introducing Slick Willie, right? We were introducing Bill Clinton. Now, one of the things that's going to stand out about the 1990s, about the Clinton years, is that it's a time of peace and it's also a time of economic growth, right? And so, because it's a time of peace and a time of economic growth, we have some military stuff, but it's not a big war. We're not dealing with something like Vietnam or World War II or anything like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really small kind of conflicts. And we're getting a lot of this economic growth fueled mostly by the internet and stuff, mostly. Um, this is going to be a time where we'll come back, we'll do terrorism as one set unit coming up here. But we're going to get this push to do a lot of like kind of reforms to society, like social reforms in this time period. So let's kind of knock out like 3 or 4 of these that are all kind of linked together. So one of the first things that gets passed is the Family Medical Leave Act. The Family Medical Leave Act is passed in 1993, and this is the first law that makes it so that employers must give leave for pregnancies, for giving birth, right? It also, yeah, it's the very first time that we've ever required companies, yeah, make it its own number.
Yeah. What should we call it?
Let's call it, let's see, what are we going to, we have this one. Let's put social reforms of the 90s. Let's call it that. We'll call it social reforms of the 90s. So here's our first social reform, is the Family Medical Leave Act. The Family Medical Leave Act is the first government requirement in the United States that women be allowed to have time off for giving birth and for giving birth and for like taking care of children, taking care of family members, like family members. Prior to this, employers were not required to do that. And women could actually get fired for taking time off to be with their sick kids, or could be fired for taking too much time off after giving birth. So let it sink in for a moment. This is 1993, right? So it's not until the 1990s when we actually get this law in the books.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this means that the United States is one of the last countries in the world to do this. Okay, we are almost the last. We're almost the last country in the world to do this. We are certainly the last country of like the wealthy countries in the world to do this. Okay, and we actually still are quite a ways behind the global standard on this, because the global standard on this is for most countries, women get paid leave for giving birth. In most countries, they'll get like a full year paid or 6 months paid. In the United States, I think it's 3 months not paid that they get. So we're actually still quite a ways behind most of the world on this.
Mm-hmm. It's better than nothing, though.
I guess. The problem is that if it's unpaid, we still have a lot of mothers who have to work because they have no choice.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's bad for the babies.
Mm-hmm.
Most European countries now have parental leave, so the fathers also can take leave,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or they have it where either mom or dad can take leave, or both can take leave. In the case of Sweden, both parents are required to take leave. They don't have a choice. They're required to take leave for 2 years.
2 years.
Paid 2 years. I think 1 year required, 2 years optional. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's what gender equality looks like.
Fun vacation.
You would not call it a vacation if you had just produced a baby.
Yeah.
Right? If you had a newborn baby in your home, you would recognize that it is not a vacation.
Yeah.
It's one of the most stressful, exhausting things that you will ever do. Right? Okay. So this is our first big reform. The next big reform, all I don't really care about this budget that much. Uh, yeah, so let's deal with Brady Bill. Let's deal with the Brady Bill. This is our next social reform. So the Brady Bill is named after the man in the picture here, James Brady. Now, James Brady was one of the Secret Service people who were protecting Reagan when Reagan got shot.
Okay.
Okay, so Brady was shot protecting the president. And the Brady Bill gets passed, and it's just about the only gun law that we have in the United States on the federal level. It's almost the only one. And basically, it institutes some gun control measures that had, like 90% support around the country. These are waiting times for gun purchases and mandatory background. The background check is pretty easy. You only have to check basically to see if the person's a felon or if the person has mental health, diagnosed mental health issues, right? And if they pop positive on either of those things, then they're not allowed to buy the gun. This has since been undermined. A lot of the states have kind of passed different laws and stuff that have tried to undermine this. But this represents the very first time where they're trying to kind of control guns in the United States. This is, of course, going to be one of the major issues as we move forward. Gun ownership is going to become deeply attached to political identity. So conservative America, Republican America is going to identify themselves as gun owners, and that gun owner becomes a central part of who they are. So if you attack guns, you're attacking them, right? And it's going to be a central issue that is never, it's not going to go away, right? Okay, let's see here. All right, gay rights is also, so gay rights is also a big issue that's rising in the 90s. And we're going to get a series of acts that are going to go on this. Now, gay rights is one of these things that the United States is kind of schizophrenic about, right? They're not really on board with it. They're getting a lot of pushback, cultural pushback against this. They're going to pass Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which is basically dealing with gays in the military. According to the military law, gay people are not allowed to be in the military, according to military law. And so Clinton wanted gays to be able to serve in the military, but he also didn't have enough votes in Congress to change it. So they passed something called Don't Ask, Don't Tell, where basically military commanders are not allowed to ask if you're gay, right? Your commander can't ask you if you're gay, but you also are not required to tell them if you are, right? This is supposed to protect gay people who are serving in the military. In practice, what do you suspect? How well is this going to do protecting people?
Not super well.
No, it doesn't really. It doesn't really help that much. It doesn't really help that much at all, actually, because commanders who want to kick out a gay person figure out ways to do it, basically. Right? And so we're going to get lots of these instances where commanders will, inspect the person's room or whatever, and then they go in the room and like read the personal diary, and they say, "Whoa, he's gay. This guy's gay," and then they kick him out. Right? But it was like a surprise inspection on the one guy that they thought was gay.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that kind of stuff starts happening, right? Congress is also going to pass the Defense of Marriage Act in 1996, which is defines marriage as between a man and a woman. They're going to defend marriage against the gays who are going to try to, get gay married, essentially. Going to try to have same-sex marriages. This Defense of Marriage Act will be overturned by the Supreme Court eventually, but it's going to be the law for the next almost 30 years. Almost, like 25 years, something like that.
Wait,
Yeah, about 25 years. It gets overturned in like 2010. So what's that?
14.
Oh, so it's only like 15 years. Yeah, 16 years. So yeah, it'll get overturned in about 15 years, something like that. Okay, let's see what else we need to do. All right. Okay, so let's deal with the omnibus. Let's make this a new number. Let's make this a new number. Where are we at?
S.
S? Okay. So let's put S is for crime. S is for crime in the United States. Okay, so at the beginning of the 1990s, crime is at an all-time high. Crime's at an all-time high through the 70s, 80s, and into the late 90s. The all-time high is actually in the 80s. It had started to decline already by the 90s, but it was still quite high. The entire country is really worried about this rise in crime. They're really worried about this. They're trying to do stuff about it. And we're going to start getting the longest drop in crime in American history starting in the mid 90s. And crime is going to continue to drop from about 90, from about like 89 all the way until about 2016. From 89 until about 2015, crime is going to continue to drop. And crime will eventually drop to below the levels it was ever before. New York City in the 1970s, New York City was one of the most crime-ridden places in the entire continent. But by the time we get to like 2005, New York City is not even in the top 100 anymore. Right? That's how safe it is. So the question is, what happened? Right? Why did the crime drop? There's going to be a lot of theories about this. I'm going to give you the one that they sell to the American people. Okay. So they sell that tough on crime works. So the government starts passing a bunch of laws to be tough on crime. And what tough on crime does is it basically uses something called broken windows theory. Broken windows theory. Put broken windows in quotes. So broken windows theory, have you ever heard that before, Sam?
No.
Okay. So broken windows theory is the crime theory that if you are walking around in the neighborhood and you see that a window has been broken and that nobody has bothered to fix that window, you're going to think that no one's here to enforce the law. And so you're going to think it's okay for you to break another window. Right? If you think no one's going to catch you, then you think it's okay to break more windows. Right?
Sure.
Well, this is the theory. And also, if you're a criminal and you do break the window and nothing happens to you, then you're more likely to do it again.
Yeah.
Right? So broken window says that people and criminals are more likely to commit crimes if they think they're going to get away with it. So what do you have to do if you think that's a true statement? If you think that previous statement is a true statement, what do you have to do as a cop?
You have to be harder and like enforce more.
On everything.
Yeah.
So the police start to enforce every law all the time. Right? So you are throwing like people who are doing graffiti, you're throwing them in jail. Where previously graffiti used to just be a fine, right? Now you're throwing them in jail. Okay. You also increase the punishments for all crimes. Okay. This includes the death penalty. So you increase the death penalty also. The theory here is that if you make the punishments worse, the criminals aren't going to do the crime. Okay, that's the theory.
Yeah.
So let's put here in your notes, let's say why this doesn't work. Because it doesn't. Clinton passed this omnibus crime bill, which at the time seemed like a really good idea. But the longer we've gone with it, the more it appears that it is not, in fact, a good idea at all. Okay. This actually has turned out to be, you know how I told you that Clinton's grade keeps on dropping? This is one of the things that is dragging his grade down, because this law, something he was super, super proud of, has actually turned out to be quite damaging and quite destructive. So, what do you have some theories of what is wrong with this crime bill right off the bat? What's your instinct tell you about this?
I mean, you're making things a lot more like serious, and so crime's first gonna strike up, right? Because if you make crime more illegal and enforcing it more, it's gonna first spike really high.
Okay. All right. So it does do that, a temporary spike. That is true. What do you think about the enforcement of this law?
It's gonna be hard to keep up on.
Okay. So you do need to hire a lot more police. So yeah. they do double the number of police in the country. Okay. What else?
Well, what else could there be? Police town.
So do you suspect that this crime bill is going to be used evenly amongst all populations in the United States?
Well, no.
Who is going to get arrested more?
My guess is the blacks.
Of course.
Yeah.
So this is going to radically increase the number of African Americans and Latino Americans who are being arrested. This also radically increases police violence. We're going to get an increase in police shootings and police violence against people. Which in turn is also going to turn our police more and more militarized.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to get a situation where police officers in schools will be carrying grenade launchers.
What?
Yeah. The police of California yesterday in the news, the police in California agreed to not allow school officers to have grenade launchers. Right? They have been carrying grenade launchers on them in schools for decades now.
Really?
Yep. Yeah.
Not in Utah though, right?
Not in Utah, but in a bunch of...
I haven't seen our school cop with a grenade launcher before.
No, but like, why would he need that, right?
Yeah, like, what are you gonna do? Throw a grenade in a classroom, or what? What would you do with that?
Even if you do have a school shooter, what are you going to do? You launch a grenade in the school?
Yeah, you're just gonna shoot him. You aren't gonna launch.
I know.
That's so weird.
Yeah,
that's so weird.
Okay, so here's our first big problem. Okay, here's our first big problem. Criminals don't actually consider what the punishment is when they're doing the crime. Are there any criminals out there really? Like, are there any criminals out there who are like in the process of stealing a car and then they stop and they think, oh, if I have a gun with me, that's going to give me an extra 10 years. So I'm going to leave my gun over here in the glove compartment of this car while I steal this car.
Probably not cases like that.
Yeah, there might be like one or two people like that, but how many criminals are going to do that? Like basically none.
Yeah.
Right? That's just not a normal way for someone to think. Right? If you're already the kind of person...
law enforcement, you aren't going to know most of that stuff anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Right? And if you're the kind of person who's committing crimes anyway, then you're already at a point where you're committing to do this bad thing,
Yeah.
right? Knowing that you're going to get an extra 5 years, maybe, doesn't really matter, right? Also, if I'm already committed to the idea that I want to murder somebody, right? And I'm like, I'm going to go into the park and I'm going to go find a stranger and I'm going to go murder them, right? Like, if I'm already decided that that's the thing I'm going to do, like, do I really care about whether or not I'm going to get, extra years on my sentence, right? Like, so criminals just don't think like that. So it just doesn't work.
They're impulsive.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, criminals, from an economic standpoint, what we use the term called rational actor, right? And in an economic idea, every human is a rational actor. Therefore, you can predict what their behavior will be.
Mm-hmm.
Problem is that most of us, or all of us, are not rational all the time.
Yeah.
Right? The rational actor will always choose job A instead of job B because job A pays more.
Yeah.
Right? But if that were true, then none of us would work in job B, and we all do, right? A lot of us work in job B because we have all sorts of reasons for picking what we pick.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, one might require you to move to New York, and the other might allow you to stay where you are.
Sure. And some of those are rational questions, right? That you say, like, I like this job better. I like, the commute is better. I like the people I work with better. It's a job I enjoy more, right? Like, those are all legit reasons why you might choose this job, right? But a lot of people make choices for, like, just dumb reasons, right? You're like, I picked this reason because the girl at the front counter was cuter, right?
Mm-hmm.
That does not make sense. Like, why would you pick that, right? That doesn't make sense. And yet, here we are, people make those kinds of choices all the time, right? All the time. And if you're a criminal who is choosing to do a bunch of criminal stuff, you're probably not very good at being a rational actor.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? Like, you're already making irrational choices anyway. So there we go, right? So that's a big problem, okay? The second problem is this almost quadruples the prison population. It's going to quadruple the prison population. Which then increases the number of criminals in the country, the number of felons in the country, which then makes it harder for those people to find jobs, right? And it's racially disproportionate. African Americans are 15% of the population, but 45% of the prison population. We're going to get to a point that by 2020, nearly 10% of Black men have been in prison. Right? That's really, really bad. The United States prison population is the largest prison population in the entire planet Earth. We have more prisoners than China does. Right? China has 1.3 billion people. We have 330 million people. So China has almost five times the population of the United States, and our prison population is more.
I mean, China also is like kind of living, communism, like.
Not really. I think if you travel to China, you're going to find that that's not really the case. Yeah. But we have more than India. India is a democracy, and we have way more than India too. And India has 1.1 billion people.
Uh-huh.
So India has 4 times our population, and our prison population is like theirs. Mm-hmm. How do you explain that?
Yeah.
Right? The problem is that we end up going really, really kind of crazy on this, and it becomes incredibly damaging. Right? Incredibly damaging and incredibly destructive. And in a world of Black Lives Matter and protests and all this stuff, like, you are witnessing kind of the aftermath of this.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Here's the last reason why this doesn't work. Crime was already dropping for other reasons. Crime was already dropping for other reasons. So let's list off at least 3 reasons. Okay. Reason number 1, the economy is getting better. People don't need to steal stuff.
Yeah.
So that doesn't, so the economy is getting better, so people don't need to steal stuff. Now that does not change violent crime. We still have the same number of like murders, rapes, assaults, right? Because if you're going to murder somebody, you're going to murder somebody whether or not the stock market has grown today or not, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not effective, right? But it does reduce things like shoplifting, burglaries, that kind of stuff. It does reduce.
Yeah.
Okay. So number one, the economy is getting better. Number 2 and 3 are going to be really weird. Okay. But well, we can do 4 of them because number 2 is going to be a pretty obvious one. So number 2, we hired more cops, therefore crime goes down. Right? More cops equals crime goes down. Okay. So number one, economy gets better. Number 2, we hired more cops. 3 and 4 are weird. Number 3, we removed lead from gasoline.
What?
Yep. In the 1970s, we made it illegal to have lead in the gasoline. And so by the 1980s, there was no more lead in gasoline at all. That's why all gasoline, if you've ever fill up your tank, you'll see that it's called unleaded. Right? You ever wondered why it's unleaded?
Yeah.
Why isn't it just called gasoline?
Yeah.
It's because, yeah, gasoline used to have lead in it, and the lead changed the temperature that it combusted inside of the engine, right? Which made the engine work more efficiently for a while. Well, now it's unleaded gasoline, and we just made better technology, so the engines just work better now, right? But what happened was by reducing the amount of lead in burning in gas, we reduced the amount of lead floating in the air, and we reduced the amount of lead that everyone is breathing in. Right? Do you know what lead does to you?
I'm assuming does it like it's a poison. I know that it'll poison you.
It's a poison that causes brain damage.
Oh.
Yeah. There's a really, really big theory that the crime of the 1970s and 80s is attributed to the fact that air pollution was so bad and so many people were breathing lead that we actually collectively had brain damage.
That's interesting.
Yeah. It's pretty cool, huh? Like it's pretty interesting. And it's this weird thing that like things are all connected in this like weird way that we're not really sure they're like we're not really, you wouldn't have anticipated that. Nobody said let's take the lead out of our gasoline in 1973 in order to lower the homicide rate in New York, right? Nobody said that, right? Okay, so that was number 3. Number 4 is maybe the weirdest one. Okay, legal abortion. When we legalized abortion in the 1970s, a large number of babies that were unwanted were never born. This theory says that the unwanted babies would have grown up in households that didn't want them, that didn't want to parent them, that didn't have the money, that didn't have the ability, that didn't have the desire to parent them, and that those people would have become criminals. Or they would have been more likely to become criminals. And so by legalizing abortion in the 1970s, the criminals just weren't born. And so by the 1990s, they just didn't exist.
Okay.
It's kind of a crazy theory, right? It's kind of this radical theory, but it actually kind of makes sense. There's a lot of like statistical data behind this that if you read the book Freakonomics, they go into a lot of details on this, right? But these are like some of these theories as to why the crime went down. And a lot of the crime went down. The broken window stuff just didn't work. Like it just increased the number of criminals in jail, but it didn't actually solve the problem. Pretty crazy, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I cannot tell you that any of these things are definitively correct, right? I can't tell you that lead definitively is the correct reason, right? I can't tell you that. What I can say is that the real answer is probably all sorts of things are contributing to this, right? Lots of different factors are going into this. It's a big, there's like, how do you solve crime, right? Like, it's one of the biggest problems in the human race, right? Hey, Emma is fine here. Anyway, it's one of the biggest problems in the human race. And so, you know, it's this like super complicated issue. Emma is in some kind of murder basement today.
Oh, this is my unfinished basement downstairs.
Okay.
They've been working up walls and stuff.
Are they? Well, we're actually finishing up right now, Emma. So you're gonna. Yeah, we're finishing up. We were doing social changes in the 1990s. So I'll post the video and then you can just do the notes on it. Sam, did you have any questions about what we did real quick?
No.
Okay, I think we're good. I'm gonna